Welcome, viewers, to the midweek edition of the Economy and Politics Show, where we continue the conversation around economy and the political scene. Today, we'll be looking at a very interesting conversation, a midweek conversation around MSMEs, and we're looking at MSME governance, capacity development in Nigeria. And that is a very interesting topic at this time where MSMEs are viewed as key drivers of the economy, but need to develop much robust capacity and governance, and also assess more critical funding to drive the economy. With me to lead this conversation today is the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Dr. Muda Yusuf. Good morning and nice to have you on the show.
Good morning. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes. So before we go on our conversation, let's go on a breather, and when we return, we will continue our conversation.
When we first met, the first question I asked was,
where have you been all my life?
Since then, we have taken every step together.
Especially when the kids were schooling abroad. Oh, how we made it through those years.
When we shared the same passion,
The same drive.
and the same vision to succeed. Let's help you achieve your visions and aspirations, milestone by milestone. FCMB, my bank and I.
Welcome back. We continue our conversation on the MSME governance and capacity development in Nigeria. So we have Mr. Muda Yusuf, the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, our guest for today's segment. First, how would you describe the recently signed Company and Allied Matters Act 2020 by President Muhammadu Buhari? Is it a business-friendly legislation that will promote enterprise development in the country? Note that this is the first time in over 3 decades that we reviewed our Company and Allied Matters Act.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. I believe the CAMA, new CAMA, as we call it, is a welcome development for business, and it's going to bring a lot of value to the whole idea of ease of doing business, especially for small businesses. Quite a number of provisions there are very good for SMEs. For instance, some of those obligatory provisions that were there before regarding the fact that all businesses must have external auditors for their accounts, then like having company secretaries, the fact that you can now, have a public incorporated company with one shareholder, the fact that there's a lot of electronic provisions, electronic access. Before now, everything you do or you relate with the authorities or in the conduct of your business compliance issues require the use of hard copies. But now, because of the digital revolution that is taking place, all of that have now been embedded into the new CAMA, which makes businesses a lot easier to do. It makes it cheaper. You can file your applications online. You can hold even your AGMs online and all of that. So for the small businesses, I think it's a great relief. And the lesson in all of this is that we should regularly review our legislations, particularly legislations that govern business. Because the practice of business is not a static thing. These are changing by the day. And as things change, the regulatory environment, the legislative framework also needs to change. This legislation is 30 years, 1990. I just reviewing it. You can imagine what businesses have suffered between then and now, struggling to comply with archaic, outdated legislation. So I think that is the main takeaway from this. Regularly, we should learn to review our legislation. And this is not just only about CAMA. We also have other legislative and regulatory framework across other regulatory agencies, which we need to review. We have the Act that governs customs, NAFDAC, SON, Export Promotion Council, and all of that. You need to see the volume of documents that you have to carry around to comply with some of their requirements. So this issue should go around. It should not just stop at CAMA. It should go around all the other compliance obligations that businesses have.
So definitely with the regular review of legislations and regulatory processes is very important. We take that as a major takeaway from what you've seen in the CAMA Act 2020 signing. Now let's look at MSM intervention. We acknowledge the fact that the pandemic really disrupted the global supply chain, has affected economies. Our economy contracted by -6.1% second quarter 2020. And efforts at stimulating economic activities have been geared towards MSMEs interventions, from the 50 billion naira intervention domiciled to the NISA Microfinance Bank, to the Nigeria Youth Investment Fund, about 75 billion naira, also geared towards empowering young entrepreneurs. I'd also like to get your assessment of these interventions. Are they being effective at this time? What additional areas would you like to see addressed as the DG of the LCCI?
Well, let me commend the whole initiative of the intervention, because the central bank has been very bullish in this area. We may not have achieved what we desire to achieve completely, but that does not take away the fact that the initiative by the central bank is a very good thing, trying to develop the real sector, trying to ensure that the economy is diversified. And of course, nobody can deny the exceptional passion of the central bank government as far as this issue of developing SMEs and developing the real sector is concerned. As for the intervention funds, of course, a few companies have benefited. But what we must realize is that the financing gap in this economy is quite huge. It's huge, and it's even more so for the small businesses. We are talking about 50 billion and all of that. If you do a proper interrogation, a proper study of the financing gap, we should be talking of things in the region of 5 to 10 trillion to actually support this economy. If you look at credit to GDP in Nigeria, it's one of the lowest that you can find anywhere in the world. It's very low. So there's still a whole lot that needs to be done. But we must appreciate the intervention that has taken place. Of course, it's not a perfect model or strategy. The delivery may not have been perfect. Quite a number of SMEs have complained about challenges of accessing the fund. Don't forget, we have about 41 million SMEs. So if you are disbursing 50 billion or 100 billion, you can imagine what percentage that can cover. When you are talking about SMEs of that size. So it is understandable when there are complaints of many people or many SMEs that they don't have access. When you compare the number with the amount that is available, it's really the differential or the gap is quite huge. But we need to ensure that there is proper targeting of these intervention funds, because I've heard stories of these funds getting into the hands of people who are politicians or friends of politicians and things like that. So we need to ensure effective targeting to ensure that it gets to the right people that can really make an impact. We also need to have a proper framework to ensure that, because these funds are supposed to be revolving funds. What I've seen is that the default rate is very high. So the framework to ensure that these funds are actually revolving, I think that framework needs to be strengthened. The risk management framework around it needs to be strengthened, so that people don't have a feeling or a mindset that these are just national cake that they get and nobody bothers to repay. Well, that is what has happened with many of those funds, whether the fund that has to be the trader money and all of those things, the Amicor Growers program. I mean, if you check the default rate in terms of payments, it's very high. It's very high. There are a lot of figures that are being bandied around, but it cannot be anywhere less than 70 to 80. So the ability to recover the funds, the ability to get those who benefited to pay back is a very big issue. And related to that is the quality of people that they give. If you give it to the wrong people, of course, the money will not come back. So we need to fine-tune the strategies around modalities of the disbursement, around the monitoring, and around targeting to ensure that we get the right outcome. But on the whole, I think it's an initiative that we must commend.
So it's a laudable initiative, but we need to ensure that the targeting is right, the monitoring aspect is effective, and the capable people are engaged. And that brings us to the question of capacity building and financial literacy, which are among the areas that experts identified as the challenges for MSMEs in the country. And note that over 85% of MSMEs are at the micro level. The rest are supposedly at the small and then medium and then large enterprise level. So, Dr. Yusuf, I would like to get your perspective in this regard. What can initiatives like the MSME standards, which are involved in going on training and building capacity for MSMEs, do more, and even the LCCI in this area, because it is very, very critical to build capacity, to create that awareness of financial literacy for MSMEs, so that when we get these funds, plus governance, the rates of defaults are reduced, and we're seeing them go to the main areas that can drive the economy.
Yes, and there's quite a lot that can be done as far as financial literacy is concerned. And I think we need to build the capacity of those of you that are trying to, disseminate information and build capacity in the area of educating the SMEs. That is what is important, because we are dealing with quite a huge number of businesses. We talked about 41 million MSMEs, although majority of them are micro, but they also bring a lot of value to the economy through employment generation and all of that. So we need to really support the institutions, the agencies, and the partners that have been engaged to strengthen, to improve on enlightenment on this financial literacy. And we also need to also support them. There must be a bit of handholding, because what we have seen is that many people who are in that space, as entrepreneurs, they are not doing badly at all. But when it comes to keeping records, when it comes to writing business plans and all of that, they cannot do that on their own. That is why I like the initiative of the Bank of Industry, with the engagement of all these small-scale BDS providers. That, once you approve them, you hand it over to a BDS provider who helps you to prepare your documents and all of that, so that you can access the facility. Because the fact that somebody cannot prepare a business plan does not take away the fact that the person is a good entrepreneur. I mean, go to all our markets in Balogun,
that's interesting
Zaleko, Alaba, Trade Complex, Ladipo, fantastic entrepreneurs. They are doing great as entrepreneurs. But when you sit them down to start writing business plans, they cannot write. And the irony is that those who can write business plans are not necessarily very good entrepreneurs. Some of them are just good consultants. So we need to realize what all of these realities, If we need to support them and hold them, prepare these things for them, so that they communicate, we put it on paper, and off they go. And the financial institutions also learn to relate better with these SMEs. They should not lay too much emphasis on business plan and all this academic side of documentation. They should be more ingenious, they should be more creative to identify a good entrepreneur who may not necessarily even be literate, and devise a framework through which they can be supported to grow. So I think we need a lot of innovation, a lot of creativity, in addition to sensitization and capacity building in this area.
And that brings me to thoughts of some experts that feel that the microfinance banks should now be repositioned to focus more on micro enterprises, because we need to have institutions that are particularly dedicated to those micro enterprise levels. Because most of the criteria, like you said, business plans, you can have good entrepreneurs, but they can't write business plans. So we need to now look at that aspect. Do you agree that microfinance banks should be repositioned to focus majorly on micro enterprises?
Yes, I agree. I mean, by even the virtue of their name, they are microfinance banks. So they should be doing a lot more with micro enterprises. And I think that is actually the model, of microfinance banking. If you look at even the genesis from where the whole concept is coming from. The main target is the micro enterprises. And it's not just about sitting in offices and coming, taking their deposit and all of that. It's also about relating with them and to support them, give them guidance on how some of these things can be done. So a lot of focus will be there. But we also need to worry about the capacity of the microfinance banks. Some of them have very weak capacity. Some of them, their corporate governance is almost zero. And that is why sometimes they also create problems of financial inclusion. Because once one or two micro enterprises get their fingers burnt with keeping monies with them, all of them, they take a flight. They don't want to put their money in any bank anymore. They characterize them, they say they are fraud, they are this and all of that. So there has to be also effective regulatory framework and effective supervision at that level to ensure that the standards, especially with risk management and corporate governance, is scaled up at the level of microfinance banking.
Very important. Risk management is scaled up, and of course governance, and the need for rethinking and repositioning them to focus on micro enterprises, because if we don't do that, we still have the issues of them not being able to access the funds, and the small and the medium and the large enterprise will continue to be the gainers, which is not the intent for driving an inclusive economy. But let's look at the fact that we face an imminent recession. I mean, just yesterday, Brazil joined the League of Countries that are in recession. Prior to now, Japan, UK, Canada have been in that list. So Nigeria faces an imminent one by third quarter 2020. We just want to look at the implications this has on MSMEs and how your chamber, which is a notable trade group in the country, is engaging the government and key stakeholders to explore better ways to mitigate the adverse impact it will have on the economy.
Well, the recession, what it means in a layman's language, is a contraction in economic activities. That means the level of resources, the quantum of resources in the economy has reduced. The quantum of economic activities has slowed down. And that, of course, affects all businesses across board. Of course, there are few beneficiaries of this crisis, but generally, practically all businesses are affected. Because once there is a contraction in the economy and the tempo of economic activities slow down, everybody suffers from it, not only the small businesses. And what needs to happen is to see what we can do. Because this economy, I'm talking of the Nigerian economy, in itself is a big economy. So there is a lot of momentum that you can generate domestically if you create the right kind of environment. Of course, there's a global dimension to this problem. But if you're able to also remove some bottlenecks domestically, if you're able to inspire a lot more confidence in investors, if you're able to create the right kind of policy and institutional environment to attract more capital to come into this economy, things can move on very fast. Because the economy is big, and the economy is also blessed with a lot of enterprises, very entrepreneurial people. And what is important is to ensure that economic governance at the economic level is much better than what it is. If we're able to improve on that particular factor, we'll be able to recover very fast from the shock of this recession. That, I think, is important. We have been toying, here and there with a number of reforms in the oil and gas sector, for instance, reforms around the private sector support for infrastructure, financing, a whole lot of issues. We just reform the legislative framework for CAMA. We need to look at issues around the ports. We need to look at a whole lot of agencies that relate with businesses. So the getting out of recessions is not just only about injecting funds and stimulus package. It's also about creating the right kind of investment climate for investors to thrive. I mean, recently we had a report of almost 30-something trillion that is lying in the banks, in fixed deposits, in all sorts of investments, because there are no investment windows. Asset classes that are of quality are very limited. And all of these things are happening because of the quality of the investment climate. And that is why, if you look at the recession, it's not just only about injecting funds and stimulus package. It's also about creating the right kind of investment climate for investors to thrive. I mean, recently we had a report of almost 30-something trillion that is lying in the banks, fixed deposits, in all sorts of investments, because there are no investment windows. Asset classes that are of quality are very limited. And all of these things are happening because of the quality of the investment climate. And when we talk about investment climate, we are talking about issues of policy, we are talking about issues of regulation, we are talking about issues of institutions. All of these things are low-hanging fruits. They are things that doesn't take long to fix. Of course, we have the issue of infrastructure, which is a medium to long-term thing. But to begin to think out with all of these other variables, I think this will pick up faster than we expected. So it is a combination of a whole lot of things to ensure that things happen. And as a chamber, our own position or responsibility is to ensure that we engage regularly with government to create the right kind of environment, particularly around policy. Because a bad policy can cause a lot of damage to an economy. It can cause a whole lot of damage. And because there is no adequate or robust consultation between the policymakers and the stakeholders in the economy, you have a lot of wrong policies being thrown at business. And before you know it, a lot of challenges are created in the economic and business environment. So it's a multi-dimensional approach that we need to put in place.
So indeed, we need the right policy environment that encapsulates, or the right investment climate that encapsulates policy, institution, and even the regulatory framework, which all those three are very important. I mean, the last report on our capital importation still showed that we are low in attracting investment. So it speaks to what we agree, that the investment climate really has to change and not reforms have to be taken. But let's go on another breather, and when we return, we will continue on this conversation.
When we first met, the first question I asked was,
Where have you been all my life?
Since then, we have taken every step together.
especially when the kids were schooling abroad. Oh, how we made it through those years.
When we shared the same passion,
The same drive.
and the same vision to succeed. Let's help you achieve your visions and aspirations, milestone by milestone. FCMB, my bank and I.
Welcome back. Now, one area that has shown a lull in activities this year has been the manufacturing sector, and it's captured in the Purchasers Managers Index, PMI, which captures activities in that space. For the previous months, it has been under the 50% points mark, which shows that it's not been at the level it should be driving the economy. So for you, Dr. Muda Yusuf, you've also raised your concerns around it and identified areas like infrastructure, like transportation network, infrastructure, support to the sector as part of the challenges it's facing to unlock its potentials and support the economy. Prior to now, we know now the COVID-19 pandemic also disrupted the global supply chain and exacerbated the challenge in the sector. Based on what we're seeing so far, do you still have new approach on what should be done from the fiscal and monetary side? Because this is one sector that can drive the productivity we're all yearning for economy.
Well, the problems of the sector are two basically the same. The problems have not changed, and the prescriptions, as far as the solutions are concerned, are also still not different from what we have always said. It all boils down to the issue of factors that drive productivity and that drive competitiveness. What is affecting the manufacturing sector is there are too many variables that are diminishing the productivity and competitiveness of the sector. It's not for lack of investors, it's not for lack of entrepreneurs that know what to do, but it is that the cost of operation, the cost of production is too high. The transaction costs in relating with regulatory agencies is too much. The challenges they face at the ports regarding their raw materials is huge. Then only recently we have this new policy of the central bank, saying that intermediaries cannot function in the payment process. Whereas a lot of these manufacturers, many of them in the SME space, they order their raw materials and equipment through intermediaries because they don't have the capacity to relate directly to the main producers. That is a major problem. We have those of them that are in exports. Some of them are also in manufacturing, processing for exports. They get their export process. The policy now is that a rate is imposed on them that is far lower than the market rate. You get your export proceeds, you are paid 386 or 385. The market rate is about 470, 475 or 460. You can look at the gap. How will that encourage mutual in export? And yet we talk about export diversification. We talk about trying to generate more foreign exchange. So all of these things create situations where businesses now go underground, or people begin to bring in forex into the economy through the backdrop. You know, so we need to address the issue of the forex environment. We need to liberalize it a bit more so that we can see more injection of liquidity from outside the economy. Because if the rates are not right, diaspora remittances will not come, FDIs will not come, remittances from export proceeds, they won't come. If they come, they will not come through the right channel. They come through the back door. So all of these things also they take their toll, you know, on manufacturing and other investments. So it goes back to the way we govern the economic environment. The economic governance in totality is very, very key. It makes a whole lot of difference. And if you get it right, I'm sure that we will recover faster than many people envisage.
But Dr. Muda Yusuf, the central bank have been told by multilateral institutions like the IMF and World Bank about unifying the rates, which of course you've also pushed for those steps to be taken, liberalize the exchange rate. Those some experts or scholars feel that we should have a managed floating system. And that is what the central bank is trying to do now, look at unifying the rates. And then also the manufacturing sector, 7 stakeholders like the pharmaceuticals have been making a case for specialized allocation, considering, like what you said, the forex challenge that's affecting investments. What's your take on this step that the CBN has agreed to unify the rates, and then also the call from critical stakeholders in the manufacturing sector to get a special allocation to help them carry out the activities?
Well, unification of the rate, I think that is the way to go. We don't even need the IMF or the World Bank to tell us that. It's elementary economics. We don't unify rates, we create all sorts of distortions. We create transparency problems, we create problems of corruption. We drive a lot of businesses underground or under the table, and that is not good for our business environment. And you drive away even very ethical people who want to do business professionally. You know, so that is the way to go. How we transit from where we are to what we should be, I think that's a different matter. The CBN is already taking some baby steps towards that end, but we need to see a lot more commitment. That if we do that, we need to remove all this speculative demand in the forex market. We need to remove all these people who are in the forex market because of the arbitrage. They don't have anything to do. They are not importing equipment. They are not importing raw materials. They are there because you have created an arbitrage opportunities. So if you have a rate that is unified, you remove them completely from the market and you leave those who actually need the forex to do some serious business. So I think that is the way to go. If we talk about special allocation, I think if we're able to unify the rate, there will be no need for any special allocation because the liquidity in the system will improve. The rate may go up a little, but I'm sure invariably it will come down because specialized allocation also has its own problems. How do you manage it? Before you know it, those who are not pharmaceutical companies who have the influence will now be the one getting those allocations. So those things are fraught with a lot of problems and it'll be very difficult to manage.
Dr. Yusuf, before we wrap up, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, NECA, both key members of the organized private sector, have called for a review of the recent directive by Central Bank of Nigeria to banks and authorized dealers to stop opening Form M for payments routed through buying company, agent, or third parties, which you just gave some insight into. Both LCCI and NECA stressed that the review of the policy is necessary to save the already distressed Nigerian economy from total collapse. So what has been the engagement level with CBN on this regard? Are you getting signals of that possible review?
Well, there is first we have made our position known publicly. We are going to follow that up with proper documentation, which I mean within the next 1 week or few days, this needs to be documented and transmitted to central bank and all the relevant agencies of government, so that we can get a review of that policy. There are also indications, at least from what MAN, but MAN is also in the picture. It's not LCCI and NECA. MAN, there are indications from MAN that there's going to be an engagement on this issue with the central bank, which is a good thing. Because the more such engagements we have, possibly even before such policy announcement, the better, so that we can have a total picture of the possible implications of policy, so that we are not going back and forth on issues of policy. So there are indications that the CBN will engage, but again, as private sector advocacy body, we also need to scale up our advocacy to ensure that we get the right kind of policies.
Which just speaks to the need for more consultation before major steps are taken in fiscal and monetary policies. But what are your closing thoughts on MSME development, capacity development, and growing an economy? What will be your closing thoughts in these conversations?
Well, we should not relent in supporting SMEs. We should not relent in supporting the agencies of government and the private sector partners that are supporting this process, because the MSMEs are the engine of this economy, from the point of view of employment generation, from the point of view of stabilizing the economy, from the point of view of creating the right kind of linkages within the economy, from the point of view of also, creating a bridge between the large enterprises and even the consumers. So their role in the economy is very critical, and
we're trying to get Dr. Muda Yusuf. We've had a very
capacity building process.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Muda Yusuf, Director General, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. It's been interesting conversation on micro, small, medium enterprises, governance, and capacity building in Nigeria. We also looked at other overreaching economic issues in the country. And of course, the major takeaway is the need for more consultations from fiscal and monetary authorities, and the need for a favorable investment climate to attract investments, and the need for a synergy between policy, regulations, and institutions to move our economy forward. We hope to have you subsequently to discuss more issues around the economy. But thank you for the time on the show. And that will be all for the economy and politics conversation on midweek today. You can join the conversations on our website by logging on to www.prochange.com to watch our videos, read our news reports, analysis. Also send your comments to news@prochange.com and all your thoughts, contributions, or what you have to say. You can also join our hashtag at AskWebTV to get further perspective and make it more interactive. Let's converse around the economy, MSMEs, and how they can grow and make us a very competitive global economy to watch. Join the conversation by 10 a.m. as we look at the private equity space by 10 a.m. That's a program where we look at how the financial and capital markets affect our economy. To come your way again, thank you for watching. Have a nice day and stay safe.